I'm Madison, 38, female, and my husband claimed his affair with our personal trainer was just physical therapy that got out of hand because I wasn't supportive enough during his recovery from surgery. The words still echo in my mind, a monument to a level of deceit I never thought possible. They are the final, crumbling cornerstone of a 12-year marriage I had meticulously designed and built, only to discover its foundations were laid on sand. My profession is architecture. I create blueprints for a living. I build things that are meant to last, to withstand storms and the slow, relentless pressure of time. I believe in structure, in strong foundations, and in the careful, deliberate process of creating something sound and beautiful. I applied the same principles to my marriage with Mark. I thought that love, like a well-designed building, was about support, functionality, and a shared vision for the future. It turns out Mark was living in a completely different building, one with a back door I didn't even know existed. We met in our mid-20s. I was a junior architect, full of sharp angles and ambition. He was a graphic designer at a flashy marketing firm, all smooth curves and easy charm. He softened my edges and I gave him structure. It felt like a perfect partnership. We balanced each other. For years, I believed that with my whole heart. Now I see that our balance was just me constantly providing the stable platform from which he could comfortably lean. Looking back, the signs were there, scattered like disregarded sketches. They were warnings I interpreted as quirks of our dynamic, not as fundamental flaws in our structure. Take our 10th anniversary trip to Italy. I spent 6 months planning it. I'm not talking about booking a simple package tour. I researched boutique hotels, mapped out driving routes through Tuscany, secured reservations at restaurants that required months of notice, and even learned basic Italian phrases to make our journey smoother. I presented it to him in a custom-bound leather book, complete with our itinerary, tickets, and confirmations. I thought it was the ultimate romantic gesture, a testament to my love and dedication. The trip was, in my opinion, flawless. We saw the Uffizi Gallery at dawn. We drove a vintage Alfa Romeo through cypress-lined roads. We drank wine that tasted of the sun. 2 weeks after we returned, we were at a dinner party with friends. Someone asked about our trip. I smiled, ready to share our adventure, but Mark spoke first. "It was incredible," he said with his easy laugh. "Maddie planned it down to the last second. It felt a bit like a business trip, but a very, very nice one." He said it with a charming smile, and everyone chuckled. But the comment landed like a stone in my chest. All my effort, all my meticulous planning, which to me was a profound act of service and love, had been translated in his mind to something sterile and corporate. I had built him a palace, and he complained about the rigidity of the tour schedule. I brought it up with him later that night, my voice quieter than I intended. "Did you not have a good time, Mark?" "Of course I did, honey," he said, wrapping his arms around me. "It was the best trip of my life. You just get so focused on the details, that's all. I just wanted to relax, not worry about being at a certain museum at a certain time." I let it go. I told myself he was right, that I could be too rigid. I filed the moment away as a reminder to be more spontaneous, another project for self-improvement in service of our marriage. The pattern repeated itself 5 years ago when his firm downsized and he was laid off. The news was a shock and Mark was devastated. He spiraled into a depression, spending his days on the couch, lost in a fog of self-pity. My love for him, my instinct as a planner, kicked into high gear. While he mourned, I acted. Within 24 hours, I had completely reconfigured our family budget, cutting every non-essential expense. I calculated how long our savings would last and picked up 2 side projects with my firm to cover the income gap. I researched the market for freelance graphic designers, built him a professional portfolio website myself, and used my own contacts to land him his first 3 clients. I thought I was being the ultimate supportive partner. I was his safety net, his launchpad, his architect of a new future. One evening, about a month into his new freelance career, I found him staring grimly at the new business bank account I had set up for him. "What's wrong?" I asked, putting a hand on his shoulder. He flinched. "It's just, you've handled everything, Maddie," he said, his voice flat. "The finances, the website, the clients. It feels less like my new career and more like another one of your projects." The accusation stung, sharp and unfair. I was trying to help Mark, I said, my own exhaustion bubbling to the surface. I was trying to make sure I didn't lose our house. I know, he sighed, running a hand through his hair, but you didn't even ask me, you just took over. He saw a hostile takeover, I saw a rescue mission. He felt sidelined, I felt like I was single-handedly keeping our ship from sinking. Again, I backed down. I apologized for being too controlling and made a conscious effort to step back, to let him handle his business, even when I saw him making mistakes I could have easily helped him avoid. The foundation of our marriage, I see now, was eroding with every one of these moments. Each time I provided practical, structural support, he perceived it as an emotional void. My love was expressed in actions, in solutions, in building a safe and stable world for us. His need was for something else, something I couldn't seem to provide, no matter how many blueprints I drew up. This fundamental misunderstanding, this crack in our foundation, remained dormant until 6 months ago. We were on our annual ski trip in Vermont, a tradition since we'd first met. Mark, ever the showman, was attempting a jump on a black diamond run that was clearly beyond his skill level. I watched from the bottom of the hill, a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I saw him lose control in midair, his body twisting at an unnatural angle. The landing was ugly. I knew before the ski patrol even reached him that it was bad. The diagnosis came a few hours later in the sterile, white world of the local clinic, a complete tear of his anterior cruciate ligament, his ACL. Surgery was unavoidable. The road to recovery, the doctor explained, would be long, painful, and require months of intensive physical therapy. As I listened to the doctor's instructions, my mind was already shifting into project mode, formulating a plan, designing a structure for his recovery. And in my focused determination, I missed the look of fear in Mark's eyes, a fear that had nothing to do with the pain in his knee. The weeks following Mark's surgery were a blur of calculated logistics. I transformed our home into a recovery suite and myself into its primary operator. My role as an architect became invaluable. I rearranged the downstairs living area so he wouldn't have to navigate the stairs, turning our cozy den into a bedroom and command center. I installed grab bars in the bathroom, bought a top-of-the-line ice machine for his knee, and created a color-coded chart for his medication schedule, taping it to the refrigerator. My work life was a frantic juggling act. I was the lead architect on a new community library project, a design that was both my passion and a massive career opportunity. I negotiated with my firm to work from home 3 days a week, a concession they made reluctantly. Those days were a marathon. I would wake up at 5 a.m. to get a few hours of uninterrupted design work in before Mark woke up. Then my role would shift. I was his nurse, his chef, his chauffeur. I made him breakfast, helped him with his morning routine, and set him up on the couch with his leg elevated, pillows perfectly positioned. I would then rush back to my laptop for virtual meetings, my microphone on mute as I silently fetched him another glass of water or adjusted his ice pack. I made every meal from scratch, focusing on anti-inflammatory foods I'd researched online. I handled all the insurance paperwork, a mountain of forms and phone calls that felt like a full-time job in itself. In my mind, I was doing everything a loving, supportive wife could possibly do. I was anticipating his needs, solving his problems, and bearing the full weight of our household so that his only job was to heal. I was exhausted, stressed, and running on fumes, but I felt a sense of purpose. I was building a bridge for him, from injury to recovery, and I was making sure every plank was secure. But the person I was building the bridge for seemed to be walking in the other direction. After the initial wave of post-surgery gratitude faded, Mark grew distant and sullen. The easy charm that had once defined him was replaced by a prickly irritability. He'd spend hours scrolling silently on his phone, offering one-word answers to my questions. The shared jokes and easy conversation that had been the background music of our home vanished, replaced by the hum of the ice machine and the clicking of my keyboard. "You don't have to treat me like a patient, you know," he mumbled one afternoon as I was refreshing his ice pack, my eyes still glued to a complex blueprint on my laptop screen. I looked up, confused. I'm just trying to take care of you, Mark. That's what the doctor said to do. It feels like I'm just another item on your checklist for the day, he said, not looking at me. Wake up, check emails, design a building, check Mark's knee, make dinner. Did you even see me today, or just my leg? The comment was so profoundly unfair that it left me speechless. I saw him. I saw him every second of the day. His comfort was the central, organizing principle of my entire existence. I wanted to scream, to list out every single thing I had done for him that day, for our family, for our life. I wanted to show him my time-blocked calendar, a testament to my frantic efforts to keep all our worlds spinning, but I was too tired to fight. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said, my voice thin. I'm doing my best. It was around this time, about a month into his recovery, that he first mentioned Jenna. He'd been complaining about the hospital-affiliated physical therapist, a stern, no-nonsense woman in her 50s named Brenda. She's a drill sergeant, he'd grumble after every session. She doesn't listen to me. I need someone who understands athletic recovery. Then, one evening, he was suddenly animated, his eyes bright for the first time in weeks. Hey, you know my friend Rick from the gym? He gave me the number of this amazing rehab specialist. Her name is Jenna. He said she worked with a professional cyclist and got him back on the road in record time. She does private, in-home sessions. My first instinct was one of caution. Shouldn't we stick with the therapist the surgeon recommended? Brenda is part of the hospital network. It's all covered. Brenda treats me like I'm 80 years old, he snapped, his good mood vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. This is my career, Maddie. Graphic design is competitive. I can't be out of commission for 6 months. I need the best. Rick swears by this woman. His argument, centered on his career, was a well-aimed shot. He knew I would never stand in the way of his professional well-being, especially after I had taken over years before. The guilt from that old argument still lingered. Wanting to be supportive, to prove that I could listen and not just manage, I relented. Okay, I said. If you think she's the right choice, then let's call her. I convinced myself that his mental state was as important as his physical recovery. If a new therapist made him feel more positive and motivated, it was worth it. Jenna came to the house for a consultation 2 days later. She was everything Brenda wasn't. She was in her early 30s with a bright, toothy smile, yoga pants, and a bouncy ponytail. Her energy was overwhelmingly positive. She didn't talk to me at all, focusing her entire attention on Mark. She touched his arm when she laughed, tilted her head with an expression of deep empathy, and said things like, "We're going to get you back to being you, Mark. Not just your body, but your spirit, too." Mark was completely captivated. He looked at her with a kind of hopeful reverence I hadn't seen from him in years. As I stood in the doorway of the living room, watching them, a small, cold knot of unease formed in my stomach. I was the architect, the planner, the one who made everything work. But she was the one who was making him smile. I told myself it was jealousy, a petty reaction born of my own stress and exhaustion. I told myself to be grateful that someone was finally breaking through his dark mood. I ignored the red flag, waving in my own living room. The rehab sessions with Jenna began the following week, and they immediately changed the atmosphere in our home. At first, the change felt positive. Mark's mood lifted dramatically on the days she was scheduled to visit. He'd be up and showered, dressed in athletic wear instead of his usual sweatpants, and a sense of anticipation would buzz around him. I told myself this was a good thing. This was motivation. This was healing. The sessions were scheduled for 3 times a week, each for a full hour. They took place in the main living room, which had the most open space. During the first few sessions, I'd be working at the dining room table, which overlooked the living room. I'd hear the professional murmur of instruction, the occasional grunt from Mark as he worked through a difficult exercise. It sounded legitimate. But slowly, things started to change. It began with the door. Our living room has a large set of glass-pane double doors that are almost always open. About 2 weeks into the sessions, I came downstairs to get a cup of coffee and found them closed. I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and could hear not the sounds of physical exertion, but low, conspiratorial laughter. I hesitated, feeling like an intruder in my own home. I turned and went back to my office upstairs, the cold knot in my stomach tightening. When I asked Mark about it later, he had a ready excuse. Jenna said I needed to focus completely, without any distractions, he explained. You moving around in the kitchen or the dining room was breaking my concentration. It sounded plausible, logical even, so I accepted it. The laughter became a regular feature of their sessions. Deep, throaty chuckles from Mark, and high, tinkling giggles from Jenna. It was a stark contrast to the heavy silence that now filled the house when it was just the two of us. The sounds of their shared joy, seeping from under the closed doors, began to feel like a personal mockery. My entire life was a silent, frantic effort to maintain order, while in the next room, my husband was laughing with another woman. My suspicions grew, sprouting like weeds in the cracks of my carefully constructed denial. I started to notice other things, small details that didn't add up. Mark, who had always been casual about his appearance, suddenly became fastidious on Jenna days. He'd insist on a specific laundry detergent for his workout clothes and spend time styling his hair, a habit he'd long abandoned. His phone, once left casually on the coffee table or the kitchen counter, was now his constant companion. It was always in his pocket or face down on the couch beside him. One evening, I walked into the room as he was texting, and he quickly locked the screen and shoved the phone under his leg cushion, a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Who are you texting?" I asked, my tone lighter than I felt. "Just Rick," he said quickly, asking about a new protein powder Jenna recommended. It was another plausible lie, another brick in the wall he was building between us. I wanted to challenge him, to demand to see the phone, but I didn't know how. What would I even say? "I don't like the sound of your laughter with your physical therapist." It sounded insane. It sounded controlling and jealous, all the things he had accused me of being in the past. My own history of being the manager of our marriage was now being used against me, making me second-guess my own valid intuition. The breaking point for my denial came during a particularly stressful week at work. The library project had hit a major snag with a zoning variance, and I was pulling all-nighters, buried in revised plans and legal documents. I was stretched to my absolute limit, physically and emotionally. I came downstairs one afternoon, bleary-eyed from lack of sleep, to find one of Jenna's invoices on the kitchen island. I had been paying them without much thought, just another bill in the mountain of paperwork I was managing. But this time, I actually looked at it. The invoice was for advanced myofascial release and kinesthetic therapy. The terms were clinical and impressive, but the price was astronomical. We were paying her more per hour than the top-tier senior partners at my architecture firm earned. A cold dread washed over me. I remembered the initial consultation, her bubbly personality, and her complete lack of interest in Mark's surgical reports or the doctor's official recovery protocol, which she had dismissed as old-fashioned. I tried to talk to Mark about it that night. I approached it carefully, framing it as a financial concern. "Mark, these sessions with Jenna are getting really expensive," I said, showing him the invoice. "Are you sure this is all necessary? The insurance is covering most of it, but our out-of-pocket is still substantial." His reaction was immediate and defensive. "You can't put a price on health, Madison. Is that what this is about, money?" "No, it's not about money," I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "It's about a woman with no clear credentials charging us a fortune for sessions where all I hear is laughter. What is she even doing in there?" The accusation hung in the air between us. His face hardened. "She's helping me," he said, his voice low and cold. "She is the one person who has actually listened to me through this whole nightmare. She's not treating me like a broken piece of furniture that needs to be fixed. She's treating me like a human being. It's working, Madison. Can't you just be happy for me?" He had done it again. He had twisted my valid concern into an attack on his recovery, painting me as a cold, unfeeling accountant while Jenna was the empathetic savior. He made me the villain so effectively that, for a moment, I almost believed him. I retreated, mumbling an apology, filled with a toxic mix of suspicion and self-doubt. I went back to my office, to the clean lines and logical problems of my blueprints, and tried to pretend that the structure of my own life wasn't about to collapse. But I knew, in that deep, quiet place where truth resides, I knew I was living in a house of lies. I just didn't have the proof to tear it down. The proof arrived on a Tuesday. It was gray and raining, the kind of day that matched the color of my mood perfectly. I was at my desk, deep in the revised schematics for the library's atrium, trying to find a solution for a load-bearing wall that refused to cooperate. My phone buzzed, displaying a number I didn't recognize with a Washington, D.C. area code. I almost ignored it, assuming it was a spam call, but some instinct made me answer. "Am I speaking with Madison Croft?" the voice on the other end asked. It was a man's voice, calm, professional, and devoid of any emotion. "This is she," I answered, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my Lar. "My name is David Harris. I'm a senior investigator with the National Healthcare Anti-Fraud Association, working in conjunction with your health insurance provider. I'm calling regarding a series of claims submitted on behalf of your husband, Mark Croft. Do you have a few minutes to speak?" Every muscle in my body went rigid. Fraud. The word hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. This wasn't about a billing error. This wasn't a simple inquiry. This was an investigation. "Yes," I managed to say, my own voice sounding distant. "I have time." "Thank you," Mr. Harris said, his tone unchanging. "Over the past 3 months, your insurance plan has been billed for services provided by a Ms. Jenna Miller, under the category of licensed physical therapy. The total amount paid out against these claims is $15,450. I felt a wave of nausea. $15,000. The number was staggering. "As part of a routine audit of high-cost, in-home providers," he continued, "we ran a check on Ms. Miller's credentials. Ma'am, are you aware that Jenna Miller holds no state or national license to practice physical therapy? The certifications she listed on her invoices are from an online weekend course for personal training. She has no medical credentials whatsoever." My meticulously ordered world, the one I worked so hard to maintain, shattered into a million pieces. The laughter, the closed doors, the secrecy, the exorbitant bills for kinesthetic therapy. It all snapped into focus, not as a series of suspicious events, but as one single, calculated deception. He wasn't just healing. He was having an affair, and they were funding it with our insurance. "The services billed for," Mr. Harris's voice cut through my silent shock, "constitute healthcare fraud, which is a federal offense. The act of practicing physical therapy without a license is also a serious state-level crime. We are launching a formal investigation into Ms. Miller, and because the claims were filed under your family's policy, we require a statement from you and your husband." I couldn't speak. My mind was a maelstrom of images: Jenna's bright, phony smile, Mark's defensive anger when I questioned the cost, the sound of their shared secrets muffled by the living room doors. It wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage vows. It was a calculated, criminal conspiracy. They had used my trust, my hard-earned money, and my signature on the insurance forms to facilitate their relationship. The cold, quiet rage that began to build inside me was unlike any emotion I had ever felt. It was a clean, pure anger that burned away all the doubt, all the guilt, and all the confusion. I was not crazy. I was not controlling. I was right. "Ma'am, are you still there?" Mr. Harris asked. I took a deep, shuddering breath. "Yes, I'm here," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I understand. I was not aware of any of this. What do you need from me?" He explained the next steps, that a local investigator would be in touch, that they would need copies of all the invoices I had. I listened intently, my mind working like a machine, processing information, formulating a plan. This was no longer a domestic dispute, it was a legal matter. And in that realm I was comfortable. It was a world of facts, evidence, and consequences. As he was wrapping up the call, I could hear a car pull into the driveway. It was Jenna's white SUV. Her session with Mark was due to start in 5 minutes. A cold, hard certainty settled over me. Mr. Harris, I said, cutting him off. Thank you for this information. You have been very helpful. I will cooperate fully. You will hear from my lawyer. I hung up the phone before he could reply. I sat there in the silence of my office, the sound of the rain against the window the only thing I could hear. The usual hum of anxiety that had been my constant companion for months was gone. In its place was a profound and terrifying clarity. I looked at the blueprints for the library on my screen, at the clean, logical lines and the precise measurements. My life's work was about making sense of the world, creating order out of chaos. It was time to do the same for my own house. I stood up, walked out of my office, and went downstairs to wait for the session to end. I didn't storm down the stairs. I didn't scream or cry. I moved with the slow, deliberate calm of an architect reviewing a final inspection. I made myself a cup of tea, my hands perfectly steady as I poured the hot water. I sat at the dining room table, the same spot where I had worked tirelessly to keep our lives afloat, and I waited. The closed living room doors seemed to mock me, containing the secret world I was about to demolish. Through the glass panes, I could see their silhouettes moving. I couldn't hear the words, but the cadence was familiar, her bright, animated tones and his low, rumbling responses. An hour later, the door opened. Jenna E. merged, her face flushed and smiling. Mark stood behind her in the doorway, leaning on his good leg. He looked happy, relaxed. He looked like a man in love. Maddie, I didn't even know you were here, Jenna said, her voice dripping with false surprise. Working hard. Always, I replied, my voice even. I looked past her and met Mark's eyes. The smile on his face faltered slightly as he registered my expression. Have a great weekend, Mark, Jenna said, giving his arm a familiar squeeze. Keep up with those exercises. I will, he said, his eyes still locked on mine. See you Tuesday. I waited until the sound of her SUV's engine faded down the street. Mark closed the front door and turned to face me, a question forming on his lips. I didn't give him the chance to ask it. The insurance company called today, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke with the simple finality of a judge reading a verdict. Specifically, their fraud investigation unit. The color drained from Mark's face. In that instant, I saw it all. The panic, the scrambling for a lie, the realization that the game was over. It was the look of a man whose carefully constructed fantasy had just collided with a concrete wall. Fraud, he stammered, his voice suddenly weak. What are you talking about? It must be a mistake. No, there's no mistake, I continued, standing up and walking toward him. I stopped a few feet away, wanting to keep the space between us clean and uncluttered. They called about Jenna. They told me she isn't a physical therapist, Mark. They told me she has no license, no medical credentials at all. They told me that the $15,000 we have paid her, that I have authorized, is for fraudulent services. They told me it's a federal offense. I delivered each fact like a hammer blow. He visibly flinched at the words federal offense. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The lies he had been preparing died on his tongue. There was no excuse, no plausible explanation that could cover this. The evidence wasn't my feelings, it was a federal investigator. He collapsed onto the entryway bench, his head in his hands. The silence was thick with his guilt. I watched him, feeling nothing. No pity, no heartbreak, just a profound, empty disappointment. This was my husband, the man I had built a life with, reduced to a common criminal. Finally, he looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. I'm so sorry, Maddie, he whispered. I don't know what to say. You can start with the truth, I said, my voice like ice. You've been having an affair with her. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. He didn't even try to deny it. He just nodded, a pathetic, jerky motion. A single tear rolled down his cheek. And then, he did the one thing I never could have predicted. He tried to blame me. It wasn't supposed to happen, he said, his voice gaining a desperate, self-serving strength. But I was so alone, Maddie. After the surgery, you were like a robot. You were here, but you weren't here. You managed my medication and my food, but you never once just sat with me. You never asked me how I was feeling, not really. You treated me like a project, not your husband." I stared at him, my mind reeling at the audacity of his words. He was taking my sacrifice, my exhaustion, my round-the-clock care, and twisting it into the weapon he used to justify his betrayal. "Jenna," he continued, his voice thick with faux emotion. She listened. She saw that I was in pain, not just in my knee but in my spirit. She made me feel seen. It started as a friendship, I swear. And then, he looked at me, his eyes begging for an understanding I was incapable of giving. It was just physical therapy that got out of hand. The phrase, the pathetic, insulting, utterly ludicrous phrase. He had packaged up his months-long, premeditated, fraudulent affair into a neat little box and tied it with a bow of my supposed failure. The emptiness inside me ignited into white-hot rage. "Out of hand," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Did you get out of hand when you conspired with her to submit thousands of dollars in fake invoices? Did it get out of hand when you let me work myself to the bone to pay for your sessions? Did it get out of hand every time you lied to my face while you were laughing with her behind closed doors?" He flinched back as if I had struck him. "You are not the victim here, Mark," I said, stepping closer. "You are a liar and a thief. You took my love and my support, and you used it to disrespect me in the most profound way imaginable. You didn't do this because I wasn't supportive enough. You did this because you are a weak, selfish man who can't bear to not be the center of attention for a single second." I saw the truth of my words land in his eyes. The victim narrative he had so carefully constructed for himself crumbled into dust. He was left with nothing but the ugly reality of his own actions. "Pack a bag," I said, turning away from him. "I want you out of my house, tonight." "Maddie, please," he begged, scrambling to his feet. "Don't do this. We can fix this. I love you." "No, you don't," I said, without looking back. "You don't even know what love is. You only know what you need, and you won't be getting it from me anymore." I walked up the stairs to my office and closed the door, the final, satisfying click of the latch sounding like the beginning of my new life. The hours after he left were the quietest I had ever experienced in that house. The silence was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered all the years of shared history. I didn't cry. I moved through the rooms, methodically erasing him. I gathered his clothes from the closet, his toothbrush from the bathroom, the half-finished coffee mug on his nightstand, and packed them all into black garbage bags. I piled them by the front door like an offering. It wasn't an act of anger, but of sanitation. I was cleaning my home, cleansing it of the dishonesty that had permeated its walls. The next morning, his campaign began. My phone, which had been silent all night, started buzzing incessantly. First came the texts. "Maddie, please talk to me. I made a terrible mistake. I'm at a hotel. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I need you." She meant nothing. You are my whole life. I read them with a clinical detachment, as if they were case studies in manipulation. When the texts went unanswered, the phone calls started. I let them go to voicemail. His messages were a chaotic mix of pathetic pleas and lingering blame. In one, he'd be sobbing, talking about the good times we shared. In the next, his voice would be tight with frustration, saying things like, "If you had just been more present, we wouldn't be here." He was still trying to find a foothold in his victim narrative, but the ground kept crumbling beneath him. My first call that morning was not to him, but to a lawyer. I found the top divorce attorney in the city and booked a consultation. The second call was to the investigator, Mr. Harris. I calmly and clearly provided my statement, agreeing to forward every invoice and email correspondence I had regarding Jenna. I was no longer a wife protecting her husband. I was a citizen cooperating with a federal investigation. The line was clear and bright. 2 weeks later, the fallout accelerated. I received a call from my lawyer. Jenna had been formally charged with multiple counts of wire fraud and practicing medicine without a license. She had been arrested. The local news even ran a small story about it online, a health and wellness influencer, busted for defrauding insurance companies. Her empire of positivity came crashing down. The day the news broke, Mark showed up at our door. I saw him on the video doorbell, looking haggard and desperate, I didn't answer. He just stood on the porch, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He knew Jenna's arrest was the final nail in the coffin of their sordid fantasy. Her legal troubles meant she had no time or resources for him. He was truly alone. A week after that, the other shoe dropped. A certified letter arrived from the insurance company's legal department. As expected, they were suing to reclaim the $15,450 paid for the fraudulent services. My lawyer had already warned me this was coming. "Don't worry, Madison," she had said. "We will argue in the divorce proceedings that this debt is his alone. His fraudulent conduct created it, and he will be responsible for it." But seeing it in black and white, our names printed together on a legal document demanding repayment for his affair, was jarring. His actions had not just broken my heart, they had made me financially liable for his betrayal. That was the final straw. It was one thing to leave me emotionally bankrupt, but to leave me with his debts was an insult I could not tolerate. He must have received a similar letter because that evening he came back. This time he didn't just ring the bell. He pounded on the door, shouting my name. Worried he might cause a scene, I opened it, keeping the security chain latched. The man on my porch was a stranger. His face was pale and puffy, his clothes were wrinkled, and his eyes were wild with panic. The charming, confident Mark I had married was gone, replaced by this broken, desperate creature. "Maddie, you have to help me," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "They're going to ruin me. I don't have that kind of money. Jenna's not returning my calls. I have nothing. No work, no money, no home." He was crying now, ugly, shuddering sobs. "It was the biggest mistake of my life," he wept, pressing his forehead against the door. "I was a fool. I was so stupid. Please just let me come home. I'll do anything. I'll pay it all back, I swear. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. I can't live without you." I looked at him, at this man weeping on my doorstep, and for the first time I felt a flicker of something. It wasn't love. It wasn't even anger. It was pity, a deep, profound pity for how small and weak he was. He wasn't crying because he missed me or because he understood the pain he had caused. He was crying because his safety net was gone and he was in a free fall. He had lost his affair, and now he was losing his finances, and he was turning back to me, the ever-liable architect, to rebuild his life for him one more time. And in that moment of pitiful clarity, I knew with absolute certainty that I was done. My job as his builder was over. "You need to leave, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "From this point forward, you can direct all your comments to my lawyer." I closed the door on his sobs, unlatched the chain, and threw the deadbolt. The solid, definitive thunk of the lock sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The months that followed were an education in demolition and reconstruction. The divorce process was messy, an excavation of our shared life, sifting through finances and assets, separating the yours and mine that had been ours for over a decade. Mark, guided by a low-budget lawyer, fought every point. He tried to argue that the $15,450 debt from the insurance company should be split equally as a marital debt. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Alina, was brilliant. In court, she presented a simple, unassailable timeline: the invoices from Jenna, the fraudulent charges, my work schedule, and Mark's own text messages to me, which she had subpoenaed. She systematically dismantled his narrative of the lonely, neglected husband. She painted a picture not of a marital lapse, but of a calculated, one-sided deception with clear financial consequences. The judge agreed. The fraud-related debt was assigned solely to Mark. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. It was a legal acknowledgement that his actions, and their consequences, were his alone. With the legal battles raging in the background, I focused on my own reconstruction. The house felt different now. The silence that was once heavy and suffocating became light and peaceful. I could work for hours without interruption, the only sounds being the scratching of my pen on drafting paper and the quiet hum of my computer. I started playing music again, filling the rooms with jazz and classical symphonies that Mark had always found boring. I reclaimed the space, inch by inch. I painted the living room a warm shade of slate gray. erasing the memory of the closed doors and muffled laughter. I threw myself into my work with a renewed passion. The library project, which had once been a source of stress, became my sanctuary. It was a place of logic, creativity, and order. As I designed the flow of the rooms, the placement of the windows to catch the morning light, and the structure of the high, vaulted ceilings, I felt like I was simultaneously redesigning my own life. I was building something new, something strong and full of light, on a foundation I could trust, my own. One evening, I was working late in my home office, putting the finishing touches on the atrium design. I looked at the blueprint, at the intricate web of lines and specifications that would one day become a real, tangible space where people would gather, learn, and find quiet comfort. And I finally understood myself. My love is practical. My love is structural. It's in the planned-out anniversary trips, the restructured budgets during a crisis, the color-coded medication charts. I show my love by building a safe, beautiful, and functional world for the people I care about. For 12 years, I had allowed Mark to convince me that this form of love was inferior, that it was cold and unfeeling, that it was a flaw in my design. I see now that it is my greatest strength. He didn't want a partner to build a life with, he wanted an audience to applaud his. My love was not the problem, his inability to value it was. The divorce was finalized last week. Mark had to sell his car and take out a high-interest personal loan to begin paying back the insurance company. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he's living in a small apartment across town, struggling to find freelance work. I feel no joy in his hardship, but I also feel no guilt. He built his current reality, and now he has to live in it. My reality is here, in this quiet house, with the rain tapping gently on the window of my office. On my desk is the final approved blueprint for the library. It's beautiful, it's strong, it's built to last. I feel a sense of peace settle over me, a quiet contentment that I haven't felt in years. I am the architect of my own life, and for the first time I'm building just for me. The foundation is solid. So, I have to ask the people of YouTube, was I wrong to see my practical support as a form of deep love? Or was my husband using my perceived emotional distance as an excuse for his own selfish choices? How do you rebuild when you discover the person you trusted was the one undermining the foundation of your entire life? I'm genuinely curious to hear what you think.